Have you ever been on a late-night flight, looked down the aisle, and seen a face that seemed out of place? What if that face belonged to someone who wasn't supposed to be there at all? Tonight, we delve into one of the most chilling and persistent ghost stories in aviation history, the haunting of Eastern Airlines. Our story begins on a dark, moonless night, December 29th, 1972. Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a state-of-the-art Lockheed L1011 TriStar, was on its final approach to Miami International Airport. On board were 176 passengers and crew, many looking forward to celebrating the new year. The flight crew was experienced, led by Captain Robert Loft and flight engineer Don Repo. They were professionals at the top of their game. But in the cockpit, a tiny distraction would lead to an unimaginable catastrophe. As they prepared for landing, the crew noticed that a single green light, the one indicating the nose gear was down and locked, hadn't illuminated. It was a small problem, likely just a burnt-out bulb, but protocol demanded they confirm the gear was down. They put the plane on autopilot and became engrossed in troubleshooting this minor issue. No one noticed the plane was slowly, silently descending. By the time the pilots realized what was happening, it was too late. Flight 401 slammed into the Florida Everglades at over 200 miles per hour, disintegrating in the darkness and swamp water. The crash was devastating. 101 people lost their lives that night, including Captain Loft and flight engineer Repo. In the aftermath, the airline faced a massive cleanup and investigation. Amid the wreckage, investigators found that many parts of the brand-new TriStar jet were salvageable. To save money, Eastern Airlines carefully recovered and refurbished several components from the doomed aircraft, things like galley ovens, electronic systems, and other interior fittings. These parts were then installed into other planes in their L1011 fleet. It seemed like a practical decision, but it's here that our story takes a turn from tragedy to something far more mysterious. Soon after the salvaged parts from Flight 401 were put back into service, strange reports began to surface from flight crews across the Eastern Airlines network. It started as whispers, then became full-blown accounts that were too similar, too frequent to ignore. Flight attendants and pilots on different planes, on different routes, started seeing things. Specifically, they started seeing people who weren't on the passenger manifest. One of the first credible reports came from a flight captain and two of his flight attendants. While preparing for takeoff on a TriStar jet, they all saw the face of a man in the uniform of an Eastern Airlines captain, looking out at them from the window of a galley oven. They were stunned. They all recognized the face. It was Captain Robert Loft, the deceased pilot of Flight 401. They called for ground crew, but by the time anyone else arrived, the face was gone. The galley oven, it was later discovered, had been salvaged from the Everglades crash site. The sightings weren't just fleeting glimpses. On another flight, a flight attendant saw a man in a flight engineer's uniform sitting in the cockpit jump seat. He seemed preoccupied, fixing a piece of equipment. She felt an unsettling chill, but assumed he was part of the ground crew. She spoke to the flight's captain, who went to check. The man was gone. but the captain instantly recognized the attendant's description. It perfectly matched Don Repo, the flight engineer who died alongside Captain Loft. The plane they were on. It was fitted with electronics salvaged from Flight 401. The apparitions of Loft and Repo seemed to appear most often on the planes containing parts from their fallen aircraft. They weren't menacing. In fact, many accounts describe them as being helpful, almost as if they were still on duty. One story tells of a flight engineer who was conducting his pre-flight checks. He was surprised to see Don Repo sitting at his panel, running through the checklist with him. Repo then vanished. Later, during the flight, that same engineer discovered a critical electrical fault that could have become a major problem. He felt that Repo's ghostly presence had warned him, pointing him toward the issue before it could escalate. Another famous incident involved a flight attendant on a late-night flight to Miami. She was in the galley when she saw a man in a flight engineer's uniform. She asked if he needed anything, but he just stared at her blankly and then faded away. Deeply disturbed, she later described the man to another crew member, who showed her a collection of company photos. Without hesitation, she pointed to a picture of Don Repo. Later, she learned that the galley module she was working in was the very same one that had been pulled from the wreckage of Flight 401. These stories became so common within the airline that crew members began to check the logbooks before flights. If they saw that their plane had parts from ship number 310, the designation for the crashed aircraft, they knew they might be in for a strange flight. The apparitions of Loft and Repo were reportedly seen by dozens of crew members, including senior pilots and vice presidents of the airline. One vice president, himself a former pilot, allegedly boarded a TriStar and saw a man in a captain's uniform sitting in the first-class cabin. He recognized him immediately as Bob Loft. He spoke to him, asking what he was doing there. The apparition simply vanished. The vice president was so shaken he immediately left the plane. The sheer number of witnesses makes this story so compelling. We're not talking about one or two people. We're talking about multiple, credible professionals, pilots, engineers, and flight attendants, many of whom had no prior knowledge of the ghost stories. Their descriptions were consistently of two men, one a captain, one a flight engineer. And when shown photos, they consistently identified Loft and Repo. The sightings were so prevalent that Eastern Airlines executives became genuinely concerned. They tried to dismiss the rumors, worried about public perception. An informal internal investigation was said to have taken place, but the company never officially acknowledged the hauntings. According to the legend, the airline eventually got tired of the disruptions and the spooked crews. In a quiet, unpublicized move, they ordered all the salvaged parts from Flight 401 to be systematically removed from every plane in the fleet. They gathered all the components, every last piece from the galley ovens to the circuit boards, and had them shipped out. And after that, the sightings stopped. Just as suddenly as they began, the ghosts of Captain Loft and flight engineer Repo vanished from the skies. It seemed that once the last remnants of their doomed aircraft were retired, their spirits were finally at peace. So, what do we make of all this? Is it simply a case of mass hysteria? a powerful urban legend born from a shared trauma? Or is there something more to it? Skeptics argue that the story was fueled by grief and the stressful nature of airline work. They suggest that the power of suggestion led people to see what they expected or feared to see. The story was even documented in a popular 1976 book, The Ghost of Flight 401, and a subsequent TV movie, which undoubtedly spread the legend far and wide. But the believers, including many of the supposed witnesses, stand by their stories. They argued that the apparitions seemed focused, even purposeful. They weren't just random specters. They were figures in uniform, often seen performing checks or appearing near equipment that was later found to be faulty. It's as if their final moments, spent trying to solve a technical problem, had imprinted themselves onto the physical parts of the aircraft. When those parts were moved, the spiritual residue, the echo of their presence, moved with them. They were a ghostly flight crew, forever bound to their machine, still trying to ensure the safety of those in the air. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the story of Flight 401 remains one of the most fascinating and enduring legends in modern folklore. It's a tale that speaks to our deepest fears about air travel, but also to a strangely comforting idea that even after a terrible tragedy, the dedication of a good crew never truly ends. So the next time you on a plane and hear an unexplained noise or see a flicker in your peripheral vision, just maybe it's the watchful spirit of a pilot still on duty. Thanks for joining us for this dive into the unknown. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration of the world's most mysterious legends. Until next time, stay curious.